Hey everyone, Sleepy Reader here. I picked up some back issues when I went to my comic book store this Wednesday, and pretty much just picked them up for the covers. One thing that's really fun about covers, about comics, especially old comics to me, is the covers. There's a special art form to it, I guess, all of its own. I picked up this Adventure Comics featuring Supergirl and a dragon. And then I picked up a number of Daredevils, and I don't know that I really want these Daredevils, except I really liked the covers. And I have kind of had Daredevil on the brain lately. That first one was by Gil Kane. This one, it turns out, I looked it up, is Herb Trimpe. I'm sorry, Marie Severin, inked by Herb Trimpe. I would have thought it was inked by John Severin, to tell you the truth. But anyway, I thought that was a really fun cover. And I really liked this Gil Kane cover on this Daredevil. And the one that kind of triggered this whole buying for the cover, I just had to have that cover with the Flash with his super brain. So I flipped through these comics. Actually, I think this Flash one might be pretty fun. The other ones I couldn't tell if they're going to be that great of a read or not. But even so, as I was looking through them, it reminded me there's something that makes me love comics more than anything else. And I wanted to talk about that on this video. Take any old blank piece of paper and you could draw on it, or you could draw boxes on it. And it's when those boxes fill up the paper that, for me, something magic begins to happen. This is very crude, but I feel more excited already just seeing this very raw, very plain 6-panel grid. Staple of comics, particularly back in the old days. Looking better than this, but this lights up my brain. There's something exciting about that. It does something to the piece of paper that is really important to me. Take these little boxes on the page and put pictures in them, and you can start telling a story. This is one of those issues of Daredevil that I picked up today. Just looking through it, found some sequences I liked. This one in particular, you just put these pictures in the boxes, and you have a story. You have a moment in time broken down. It's a bit like a movie, but it's not. It's different. Maybe in a movie you could use slow motion or speed things up. But anyway, putting them in these boxes does something with time. And with time, stories are all about time in a sense. So here's a great thing that happened in a split second. They could have put it in 1 or 2 panels, but they put it in 4 panels. Gene Colan put it in 4 panels. And it's just really awesome. It sucks me in. Now that may be the way my brain works in particular. Here's another page from one of the other Daredevils I picked up. And even more, this brings you through what's going on. You start with a bright light, it gets darker, then you wake up. Or Matt Murdock wakes up. He's blind, so I guess he's in his brain he might see light, but he's not going to see it there. And we can further watch him. We go from there to there to there to there. So from the top of the page to from one corner of the page to the bottom corner of the page, his situation has changed. We've moved through time and space, and I don't know. It's really compelling to me. And again, I mean, it's not as simple as these things, but it's no super fancy layout, but the little boxes make such a difference. There's another page that I picked out. Now, one of the obvious things, kind of like that page where we saw him jumping for the ledge, you can use the panels to break down action and make it exciting. And you can use their placement. The top row is all Daredevil fighting one guy. The bottom row is some other people in this same melee fighting. Another interesting thing is, I mean, I could have looked there at the last panel, but once you train yourself, your brain to read comics, your brain is going to focus on it panel by panel, starting, well, in Western comics, American and European comics, starting at the left top hand and moving your way through it. And you may see other panels. I even see this panel over there, but I don't register it deeply. I go in and my brain follows the boxes. And it's powerful, to me anyway. Another interesting one, kind of similar, from this Flash issue, drawn by Ross Andru. Here's just a moment of revelation. Part of my brain realizes already that he's got this big head, but I still go into the first box, and slowly watch him discover how huge his head has just gotten. I mean, part of my brain probably took in that panel at the bottom too, but I'm able to follow the boxes, and it's just a great way to make that little reveal. And there's a lot of drama there. And in this adventure comics, so I'm still just looking at what I happened to buy today. There's a Black Canary story. Sadly, the page is ripped. I'm a little bummed by that. And it turns out it's drawn by Alex Toth, who's considered one of the great artists of comic books, one of the hidden gems that fans don't know so much about, but artists all love. And I got to say, his style looks nice to me, but not so much that I'm super thrilled. But if I think about his paneling, this is a really wonderful page in a subtle way. We start with this big panel, and then we kind of break things down. So kind of this big panel draws us into the scene and sets the mood, and then we break things down into what is really going on. And we move sort of gracefully to the point where she has her full costume on and is gone from lying around kind of moping to getting ready for some action. So lovely page, lovely use of panels. I really dig it. One thing that hits me as I was looking at those panels, especially looking through a camera and realizing how my brain will follow the panels and not and wait for the revelation in later panels rather than taking it all in completely, is it's a subtle form of suspension of disbelief. You believe in the panels. If comics work for you, you believe in the panels, you believe in their ordering of time, and you follow that ordering of time. Now, sometimes, especially I find in modern comics, you suddenly can't figure out which order to read things in, and then you're thrown out of that disbelief, that suspension of disbelief, not in the fictionalness of the story, but in the breakdown of time. So anyway, just a thought that popped into my head. While I'm at it, I just thought I'd show a few more examples of panels that I really like and that show things, are doing things that I really liked, maybe that were revelations to me at the time. I'll turn the camera around again. A great one for breaking down the action, I just realized after talking about how Frank Miller did it a lot in Daredevil on the podcast I just did with Matt, was Steve Ditko. And I just have this True Believers laying around that Steve Ditko did of the Hulk, and immediately found lots of examples of him breaking down the action. Again, changing the timing of things and etc. If you just look at how he brings the drama to discovering if this version of the Hulk can jump through the air the way the other old one did. And all throughout this, Ditko is doing amazing panel-to-panel movement and reaction and everything. But here's another example of when you want to break down the action and give it that weird Steve Ditko drama, I suppose. But you can see it's all over this comic. A famous sequence, which Stan Lee even kind of highlighted back in the day. Oh, this is from a omnibus, so it's a bit bigger. Let's see if I pull back the camera. Pardon me. So anyway, As you can see, it's a very kinetic battle scene between Batroc the Leaper and Captain America, drawn by Jack Kirby, I'm guessing circa 1966 or so. 66 is my best guess. Anyway, I can look it up later, I suppose. And Stan Lee actually wrote, "The wise man knoweth when to speak and when to shutteth up. Sly Stan knows that no words of his can do justice to Jolly Jack's great action scenes. And so," and then at the bottom, "see what we mean, frantic one?" And you have to remember, this is during the period where Stan would have been telling his new writers, you've got to put several chunks of text into every panel. So this was very, very daring within the context of how they did comics at Marvel and DC at the time. But Kirby's panels were so overwhelming that that Stan decided just to point that out and let them speak for themselves. And it was also a standard, at least at Marvel Comics at the time, that you should be able to read the comics through the pictures, roughly anyway, which is ironic because they always insisted on putting so much dialogue on it in every picture. However, it was a professional thing to do, and the panel to panel is how you read pictures, in this case. And Kirby was a master of that, panel to panel. In fact, let me show you an example. Lots and lots of people have literally done this page in one way or another, including Jim Steranko in one of the issues of Strange Tales, where he was doing the adventures of Jim Steranko. However, in this one, there's lots of dialogue. Is it better with the dialogue or without? I don't know. I'll talk about dialogue some other day. My first experience really appreciating that sense of panel-to-panel movement and coming to realize how much this sequential thing could give me emotion, emotion of the moment building up, was from Barry Smith's Conan art. And in fact, I think I first saw this sequence here, these panels on the bottom, on a letters page, on a later issue, in which they highlighted this sequence. And I'll have to go back and find that letters page. I don't know if they talked about how amazing this was. And again, panels without words in them were actually quite unusual then. And it was kind of radical of Roy Thomas not to put the words in these panels. But here we see Conan having been thrown in jail because his girlfriend Jenna, who'd been involved in adventures with him for about 4 or 5 issues at this point, had betrayed him for some money, got a new lover, betrayed Conan so that he was sent to jail and was going to be probably executed. But he escaped jail and came back for his revenge on Jenna. And there we see how angry he is. And that just communicated so much to me as a kid. And it's just such a striking sequence of pictures. So yeah, that, and then I think there was a lot of emotion also in whatever, I think it was the first issue where Elric appeared, was my actual first Barry Smith Conan. But I later found this story in a Marvel Treasury edition, so I did get to read it as a kid in full after having sort of soaked in these panels off that letters page way back then. And I also got somewhere along the line to read the Grim Gray God Passes, written by Roy Thomas and art by Barry Smith. And I remember just feeling strong emotions and just a powerful effect from this. And a lot was because of the just sequences of panels and the way Smith put together the panels that just made this seem like a very powerful story to me. Here, for instance, on this page, we have the battle building up between two sides of barbaric. They're actually more civilized than Conan, and then this sequence of panels alternating between different characters because of the story, we know where they are emotionally. The two lovers, two men. There were two pairs of lovers in this story: the man here, the woman, and the other woman here, and the build up to it. And what's that in the background? Is that the Grim Grey God? I'm not sure. But anyway, this was very powerful stuff to me at the time. And it still is when I look back on it. And here, this whole page, the way the sequence of events works, just was full of powerful emotion and just drew me in. So I think this issue was one of my first awarenesses of how a sequence builds up and has a strong effect on me, although I perhaps couldn't have explained it all then. But I just fell in love with that feeling of moving from panel to panel. On this page, Conan, who's escaped from slavery and is joining this army, has this conversation, and there's this build up to whether these two people are going to trust each other. And the guy lifts his axe and then smashes Conan's chains. And that build-up is pretty incredible. If you looked ahead, you would see he smashed his chains. But if your mind does that trick where you just believe in the order of the panels, you get this build-up of suspense of what's going to happen. And the whole sense of kind of the stress of preparing for battle again. So I always felt like this issue of Conan was an amazing one by Barry Smith. And it was Conan number 3, but it was actually the 5th issue he drew. And they reordered the publication of the issues. So he was becoming, I think this is the issue where he was becoming a very strong artist. He hadn't developed yet his extremely detailed finesse with the embellishments, but he was already becoming a really masterful storyteller by his use of the panels. Though here's a nice sequence from Jim Steranko, who was learning from all these other people, from Jack Kirby, from Steve Ditko, and especially from Will Eisner of the Spirit fame, who he later wrote a lot about in his History of some Comics. And Steranko added kind of a graphic flair to a lot of what he did. So here we see a page with a great series of sequences, but he's also playing with how the panels work, playing with the design work. That kind of gives us kind of some of the emotion and the action, both in the panels and the visuals. And the way this panel breaks off, he's always kind of experimenting and growing. It was one of those exciting runs to read. Another reason why I'm all about reading the runs as opposed to just looking for key issues. And here's Steranko as the writer and artist. You made really great use. This is a very famous sequence of silent panels. But anyway, an incredible sequence with Steranko coming into his own, but drawing deeply on the influences of all the best people in comics. I guess I also thought this one was interesting, where he chooses to show action, sound effects, kind of a different way to break down the action, which I thought was really cool and creates a real excitement and dynamism. And finally, he, like Barry Smith, was able to use the sequential stuff to really capture other kind of emotions. And here, it's a quiet moment between lovers, which I believe had to be edited for something for the Comics Code Authority. I can't remember now what it was they edited out. Maybe it had something to do with where the guns were placed or something like that. I like that the phone is there. I don't know, it's just such a cool sequence. Now, I'm not really doing this video to advertise silent sequences, sequences without words, but it just happens to be a good way to kind of take a look at this kind of thing. Another master of the sequential nature of comic book art, and a master of comic book art in general. I mean, he was, as I said in a previous video, he was kind of a genius at covers, which is a whole different thing, but Neal Adams could really do an awesome sequence when he wanted to. Here is from Avengers number 93, where we're following Ant-Man's adventures inside the body of the android Vision. So we've got that. Then we've got this incredible fall that as Ant-Man falls deep into the Vision's body. And then the huge panel where he pulls up. Man, would I love to own that piece of artwork. Everything's incredible in this sequence with Ant-Man. But, and here we have an interesting kind of movement out of the panel, and a whole long sequence where he's running from these platelets, which are like white blood cells that are trying to attach themselves to him. And the sequence showing where he escapes. You can look at all of this without reading the dialogue and get so much from it. But incredible use of panel after panel after panel. Just love Neal Adams, particularly, in these highlights of his career. Another one, less super sort of pizzazzy, but John Buscema could use those panels. And here he's lushly inked by Alfredo Alcala, and you could get just distracted get lost in all these little lines and everything. But this is an incredible sequence between Conan and his female captor, who drugs his mead, and you can see how everything progresses panel by panel. I just love it. You can find examples of brilliant sequencing in almost every episode of The Spirit that was written and drawn by Will Eisner. The caveat being there's a lot that weren't written and drawn by him while he was off in World War II. But here we have one from, I should check the date ahead of time. They usually say in the small print, one from 1948, as the Spirit ventures down into the underworld of the sewers, and we get all kinds of interesting panel to panel shots that move us through the sewers, and it's really incredible. And by the way, I think that's a big influence of the sewer scenes that Frank Miller uses in Daredevil. And here's another one. This one's in color, where we just get, this is a simpler one. We just get the action that's going on inside an elevator. And I love how here Ebony thinks that's the Spirit there. Later we'll learn it's not. Anyhow, anywhere you look in Will Eisner, you're going to just find a masterclass. And it's no wonder that he's the one who tried to coin the word, or did coin the word, but tried to make it the more popular term instead of comics or comic books, to call it sequential art. And he was truly sequential. He lived and breathed the sequential. So here's the Spirit in a fight, and it's just a powerful series of visual scenes leading us through the climax of this particular story. But I could go to any page here and you would see amazing panel to panel movement and storytelling. So once again, I've done a much longer video than intended. I hope all this made sense. I think I'm going to come back to this idea of showing panel sequences that I particularly enjoyed. I really enjoy doing this. Hopefully some of you will come along for the ride with me next time when I go surfing panel to panel.